not as gnarly. It took a little while, but being in okay shape, that helps a lot.
It's not, I don't know why it's not like picking that up for some reason.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah, thanks.
And we are recording for good.
Yeah, so
Okay, let's begin. Call this meeting, special board meeting of the West Valley School Board, June 5th, 2023. Citizens may comment on items appearing on the agenda when invited to participate during that agenda item by the board chair. Citizens may comment on items related to school district business not appearing on this agenda during the public comment portion of the meeting. Citizens, after identifying themselves, will proceed to make comments as briefly as the subject permits. Basic rules of decorum are in effect at all times. The chairperson may interrupt or terminate an individual's statement when appropriate, including when statements are out of order, too lengthy, breach personal privacy rights, are abusive, obscene, irrelevant, or otherwise improper. The public should realize that this is a trustee business meeting conducted in a public forum. Stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Krista,
Yeah.
would you like to present your booster club
Yes.
situation here?
So I emailed all of you board members in your email a little bit about the booster club that I
Have you got it?
looked at, the Glacier Booster Club that I've worked with in the past and kind of piggybacked off of them. It's all just kind of the new beginning of it. I've worked with Terry on it a little bit, so she's seen it. And Tina and I talked about it a little bit today, so there's a lot of things, or there's some things that we need to work on, whether or not we need to have it say just Warriors Booster Club and not use West Valley, or you know what I mean? Because it's not going to be a part of the West Valley, it's going to be for the West Valley type of thing. So we need to learn some policies on whether or not we could do that or not. So could I just talk to Terry in the hallway? But it's kind of why we would do it, how we would do it, how the club would be, not just for athletics, it would be for administrative stuff if things needed, like pay for a school bus for some trips or supplies or projects or robotics or something like that, as well as athletics. So that's kind of how it works. It says like the perks of it, you're an honorary warrior, so you guys can read all of this. It's just, this is just kind of informative. So you guys know that Terry and I did work towards something to try to help out our athletic club and stuff. It'll be put up as a 501c. So the donors can write it off as a donation if they use their business or whatever. So it can be a tax write-off as well. And then it says the different levels of donors and stuff like that. Kat was going to work with me on doing some graphic design stuff on the bottom and get the West Valley logo like white for the white membership bronze and kind of make it kind of fun, and then do a hyperlink from the West Valley page to the booster page and so on and so forth. So this is just informational stuff for you guys to see, to have it. We don't know if you guys have to approve it as board or not, which is the policy that we need to find as a booster club for the school. So just strictly informational. That was all. Just some, hopefully we can get it together before maybe next year or this summer and kind of start putting it out there so we can get some money flowing in for the school and other avenues. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
I'll forward it to you, Cecile. I have drafted it in there for you. Sorry.
okay, now, presentation of the preliminary FY24 general fund budget. Cindy Foley is gracious enough, she's worked on this, to share this with us.
yeah, so this first sheet is what we business officials use to begin the budget process. And this comes from OPI. It's called the Preliminary Budget Data Sheet. And this is post-session after the close of the legislative session. And then I'm just going to give you the rest of the handouts here today. So then I'll just sit down. So I'll start first with the preliminary budget data sheet, and then we can show you how we arrive at the numbers. So our budgets are built off of A and B calculations that are from the prior school year. And so then OPI runs the calculations, and they then determine what our entitlements are. And then we go, it includes what our overbase levies have been in past years, and then gives us a highest budget without a vote is what we tend to go with. And then we can build on that with overbase money, which would be tuition money, and in our case, specific to West Valley. So if you go to the second page there on that budget data sheet, and under number 9, the FY 2024 budget limits, it's going to show you under D, the highest budget without a vote, and that's $5,012,514.87. And then we can put overbase revenues on there, and we are doing that with tuition money of $45,000. We've been pretty consistent through the last several years at $45,000 that we can use in the general fund. And in Cecilia and I visiting, those numbers are gonna look to be about the same going into this next year. And so they're cash dollars though. So if the money doesn't come in, you don't spend it, okay? So you'd underexpend your budget if the cash money doesn't come in. But in past years, it has. So our voted levies that we've had in the past have been $372,265.67, and that's under number 10, prior year info for budgeting. We haven't passed a general fund levy out here since, I believe, 2007. And so the importance moving forward is that the district be able to pass a general fund levy. And so we know that the board has discussed that moving forward in this next school year, that next May, there could potentially be a levy for the general fund before our community out here to vote on. So with that, I'm gonna kind of share on page 1 of that, they show numbers that are derived in the A and B, and that's under the number 1. And so it shows you the FY 24, it shows you a 3-year average A and B. When we go to work on our budgets, we always go with the highest A and B number that we can use for calculations. And so in the 17 years I was here, there was maybe 2, maybe 3 years where our 3-year average was higher. Usually it's been the current numbers that we have, which for funding your FY 24, those numbers are coming from the 22-23 school year. So when I look back at the A and B numbers over the last 4 years and the numbers that are funding this budget, in the A and B used for 2021 overall was 732. In 21-22, it jumped to 748. The numbers to fund the 22-23 budget were at 803. And for 23-24, those numbers are 786. So our numbers are down. When you look at those numbers, the middle school has gone from 567 kids in 2021 up to calcs for 23-24 are built on 632 kids. When you look at the elementary, in 2021, that budget was built on 165 elementary kids. Currently, it's 154, so your numbers are down in the elementary. I'm going to speak a little bit as we,
That should be.
pardon?
Just flip, all right? Elementary and middle school.
Just to reverse it, just.
Excuse me, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
gotta be reversed.
567 to 632 and then 160, yeah, sorry, my bad.
No worries.
So when we go through this, then that kind of gives you an idea of how a budget is built, and it's built on the A and B of the students, and then various calculations that run through at OPI. So, okay, from there, I think we'll jump to the summary page, which is a one-page document. That's the salary FY24 steps and lanes plus 2%. So when we looked at building this budget for FY24, and of course, they were in the middle of negotiations with teachers, and the board offered 2% on the base. So we built a budget off of there with salaries and benefits. It's coming in at 90.5% of budget. And this budget for this next school year is $5,057,514.87. Your budget for the 24 school year is only up $17,000. A lot of that is due in part because your numbers have dropped. Any questions so far? Laurel, I'm sorry.
Just drinking from a fire hose
It's
over here.
all new, yep.
And so this is based on a 3-year average then, or no?
No,
Just
we're
last-
using the current year numbers.
Okay,
Yep.
but
we're
where does
using
our
the current
funding
year.
actually, how is our funding actually generated? Is it based on this previous year's numbers or the 3-year average?
The previous year's numbers. You take the
Okay.
highest of the two, either
Oh,
the
okay.
3-year average or the current
Oh,
year.
Okay, got it.
And so
Okay.
we're working with the current year numbers.
Okay,
Sorry to go back. What did you say the numbers were in elementary or not in elementary, I'm sorry, middle school in
2021 middle school 165.
Is that 6-8 or 7-8?
This is the 7-8.
7.
Yeah. So yes, always 7-8 because we get a little bit higher funding with that middle school at 7-8 rather than a K-8 elementary.
Would you say did it drop in 22?
21-22 went up to 175. 22-23 was 171. 23-24, 154.
and that's based on how many parents have said their children will be attending?
No, this is
Or-
based on the number of butts in the seats on a specific count day twice a year.
Okay.
So these are the kids that are enrolled in the district that we are running through
Okay,
all of our student attendance and whatnot. So these
Okay.
are enrolled kids.
okay, that we're
Yeah.
projecting for 23-24.
No, these numbers are based on the 22-23 school year.
Right, but that doesn't take into account like kids that may be moving into the district, correct?
The funding for public ed is always a year in arrears.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Next
Okay.
year's
Yeah.
projections at 7th and 8th is 170 kids again.
Okay,
So there's a small class that moved through. It's
Okay, got
affecting us and they graduate
Yeah.
this year.
okay.
I have a question. So this proposed budget, this includes the potential salary for the hire that we're considering as the next item on the agenda.
Yes, it does.
And then Cindy or Cecilia, in your opinion, I mean, obviously looking at this compared to what we dealt with this year, it's, you can see some positives in the steps that have been taken, to try to move towards a more sustainable budget over the course of the year. But we still, as far as looking from the salaries and wages perspective, but that line item boxed in red, which is basically all the other general fund expenses outside of salaries, that continues to be trimmed down to the bare bones, to basically an unsustainable amount over the long term. Would you guys agree?
Correct. Yes.
So even able to kind of maybe potentially sneak this under in a balanced budget scenario, it's not what I would say from kind of a maintenance and supplies and supplemental basis, a sustainable budget. No,
and we're high. You want your salaries and benefits in an 84 to 86% of budget is a good workable number, because then you're going to have some some supplies available in there, minor equipment. You're going to have some in-service monies. I mean, things change in schools, as we all know. And so in-service is a very important part for everybody concerned, your teaching staff, your classified staff, the school board. It's something that needs to happen, because things change so much in schools, and especially school funding. And, but this budget is not sustainable moving forward unless some cuts are made, because it's not foreseeable that you're going to see a huge jump. And right now at 90% of budget, there is no supply money budgeted in this. There's no minor equipment. There's no in-service. We've got the copier contracts in here to pay, but we don't have paper to put in them. There's no money budgeted for it. There's no money there. And so, we'll jump to this budget right now, and we can turn to the last page, and you'll see that it's 5,057,517.87. That includes the 45,000 in over base out of district tuition that we are anticipating getting. And this budget right now is budgeted, but it does not have any supplies in there. No, like I said, no minor equipment. We have put everything in regards to the salaries and benefits. We have not any vacant aide positions. There's no money for them. Only current people that are on staff are showing in this budget. So we've got 3 certified positions that are being filled in-house if needed. We've got a retirement. We've got another teacher that is left, that one's being filled in-house. There is a math position in the middle school that, to my knowledge, is going to be filled with current staff. And then you've got your other position that's on the agenda tonight. That is in this budget.
But there's no extra like paras or anything calculated in that.
No. And we just hope that our Title I funding comes through with what we're anticipating, because a percent of those aides are paid through Title with that Title I budget. So
Any
hopefully,
idea of when we'll know about that?
oftentimes it's summer when we're finding out. Hopefully sooner, but yeah. And that's federal money. So you have to pay all of your salaries and benefits, retirement, everything for a position out of the federal money. Whereas someone who's paid through the general fund, you can access their retirement benefits through the retirement fund that we have that is taxpayer funded. But if you pay somebody a salary with a federal budget, a federal grant like Title I, all of their benefits are paid through that grant. So you don't really get all the bang for your buck in that situation, but they're given what percentages of the title budget are going to pay towards aids. There aren't any supply monies available in that Title I budget either.
And in this number that's in this box, so it's pretty much probably just propane, electricity, the software programs we need, the liability insurance we need, literally just the bare necessities.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I appreciate the point there, just because, we just want to make that when we proposed I guess circling back to, with the teacher negotiation discussions that we've had, we initially proposed a 0% raise on base. We moved off that number when the teachers, through kind of reworking the health insurance contract and switching over to Blue Cross Blue Shield, created the ability to opt out of that, which created basically within the budget, allowing the teachers to opt out, created about that 2% raise for the year. So we did feel it was appropriate to kind of put that in the teachers on the teacher side of the table. Above and beyond that, just given where we are from a budgetary perspective, we didn't feel like that we could move beyond that for this coming year. I think when we look at our budget, this obviously is trimmed to the extreme. I think potentially when we look at the budget that we'll likely adopt for the next school year, we'll have to accept some sort of, we'll likely have to deal with some sort of general fund deficit, a smaller, not a $250,000, but maybe a smaller draw on our reserves for next year. And then really the big question that we'll have is, when we go to run the general fund levy next May, whether, if that passes, it would kind of set us on course for, path A. If it doesn't pass, we're on a very different path, in the future, which is going to involve, unfortunately, it's going to involve larger class sizes. It's going to involve, kind of less extracurricular activities or options within the school. Obviously, we're going to try to keep everything that we can and have provide, but we need to focus on making sure that we can remain solvent and provide, and meet the educational standards that we have to. And unfortunately, sometimes extra programs aren't part of that. So we have I guess overall, I'm happy that we've made the progress we have for this coming year from a budgetary perspective, but there's still a lot of work to do. And if we don't have a general fund levy passed, for the 24-25 school year and thereafter, we're going to have to make some significant cuts across, and changes across the staffing levels just to work within a sustainable budget going forward. I guess that's my only thing I'd like to say.
There, in 21-22, there were 6 new certified positions created, 4 in the elementary school and 2 in the middle school. And the funding has not been there for those to continue moving forward. It's not sustainable at this point. And so like Jeff said, next year could be there could be a real tough, hard discussion. I would hope that this district does not have to go to another budget amendment, because if this year all 250,000 of that current budget amendment was used, that drains you down to about 200,000 in your reserves. You're less than half, you're below 5%. You do not want to bankrupt this district. And I encourage you to do, if you do go to those, that it is minimal. I mean, 100,000 is far too much. You
Yeah, I agree.
have to have money in your reserves to get you through the summer before the state funding starts coming in, before the taxes start coming in from the county. We don't get funding every single month from the state. And so you have to have money sitting in your accounts in order to pay your summer bills. Because if it's not there, you're having to go to the county and have them float you some money and pay your bills for you. And this district was in that far before my time, but I remember Gary Kruger talking about it from the time I started here in '03. And their philosophy on a budget was 80% salaries and benefits, 20% for the maintenance and supplies. So we had been able to work that up to the 86%, and that would work here. And we still would work starting in January of what our needs were for the next year. So we would know if it was curriculum related, in service, what the needs were. So any other questions?
These 6 new positions that were created in 21-22, I think that was presented to us as being funded with ESSER funds. And that was, but once they quit, then those positions were not funded by our budget, correct?
I wasn't here for that discussion because I left after the 1920 school year.
Right,
And of course, your ESSER funds are gone.
right.
That money got used up in short order.
That's right.
And so those, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cecilia, because we went back and looked at some of those were paid through the general fund.
They were.
Other things like supplies and equipment were paid through the ESSER monies.
Because it was very specific what we could use that ESSER money for.
So,
So they should do.
but when those ESSER monies left, then there should have been some switch happen to gain that funding capability back in your general fund. So
Is it too late? And I know that this is not a happy question. Is it too late to look at some of those switches for this upcoming school year?
your contracts all went
Are
out by
signed.
June
Okay.
1st. You have 2 positions in the middle school right now that were open. One is before you this evening. The other one, Tina has opted to fill in-house with current staff. So if the numbers go wonky when school goes to start, you're going to have to say you need another classroom at the elementary level. Well, one of those people that aren't currently in a classroom are going to have to go into a classroom. They're already on contract. You're not going to be able to hire an additional person outside of your current staff. The funding is just not there. It's just not.
And then and I don't know, you're gonna know this better. Don't you have to have a certain percentage in that emergency fund too for bonds and levies, like for your rating to be able to, can you touch base on or fill us in on that?
Yeah, back in 2012, when we went through the last bond, and Standard & Poor's, they want a 10% your reserve max is 10%. They want that max at or very near 10% so that you can maintain an A+ rating when you go to sell and issue bonds. And so you're going to need those reserves to be back at that 10% when you are ready to go out for bond. Because an A+ rating is, you want that rating because it makes you look really good when they go to, like DA Davidson goes to do a bond sale. And they ask all kinds of questions in regards to the financial realm and the board, your business manager, and so your superintendent. And the bottom line is your financials have to be in really good shape. So that's the next step, is getting those reserves built back up. And, you know, Cecilia will know after all these payrolls are done in June, just where things are at and how much of that 250,000 reserve got hit.
And at that 86% of salaries, whenever you were here, were you able to put some back into the reserve based on an
Always.
86%?
Always. Any money you are left with at the end of the year, you move that into your reserves, and it's 10% of the new budget that you're coming into. So this budget's now gone up 17,000, and you're looking at this $5,057,000 budget. And so you want your reserves for this next year to be at 10% of that. We would oftentimes get to the end of a year and say there was a project that we thought, if there's any kind of year-end funds, can we move forward on a project? And so we could use some of those year-end funds if they were over what our reserves were. We could use those for part of a project, and then encumber those, and then use maybe some money in the new budget to meet that need, whether it be a curriculum project, a tech project. We would have some of those because we really we never had a tech levy. And so that's where we would see some of those at the end of a year. So bottom line, this budget, this preliminary budget, along with the other budgeted funds that the district has, the transportation, retirement, all of those, Cecilia will be presenting those to you as a preliminary budget on the 19th. And then you will formally approve those at your August budget meeting. And that's where you will see the final numbers for the trustees' financial summary on FY23 to see where the year ended. Yeah.
So is this budget realistic? Because I'm hearing you say we don't even have money for paper for our printers, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out in a school? It doesn't seem realistic.
I don't know how you've done it.
Well,
Go ahead,
I was
Jeff.
just going to interject. I think it's kind of, it just shows, like, I appreciate the approach that they took here to say, you know, okay, this is how we can actually, this is what we would have to do to actually balance the budget. And so then, as Cindy said, like, every dollar that we budget above this amount, it better be like a dollar that is absolutely necessary. And I'll agree with you, paper, like, we need to have paper. But so we're going to have to scrutinize every single expense to make sure that, you know, if we do have to draw down on the reserves again, that it's at the absolute minimum amount that would make it sustainable. So it's just, they got us to a point where you could actually balance, and now we have to, you know, if we want paper, we better really want paper. And it's, you know, and it's just absolute necessities beyond what's outlined right here. And I think one thing that we've talked, or proposed is, through the course of the summer, having, more budget workshop sessions where we could really line out what is absolutely necessary for next year ahead of adopting the budget in August, just to make sure that we all feel like we have time, we have input, everybody gets to, have time to make their case for why they feel like these are necessary expenses above and beyond what we have here. And so hopefully we can get, a couple of those planned through the summer that can help us kind of really dial in on exactly what we, can propose for the next school year.
One thing that you can look at is, say your tuition for out of district kids, I'm just going to stay with $1,000 as a nice equal number. If you have 50 out of district kids that have paid tuition to come to West Valley, you're going to use $45,000 of that to fund your general fund budget. You'll have $5,000 difference that goes into its own miscellaneous fund. That $5,000 could be used for supplies. So, and you have to spend that within that school year. So anything over that $45,000 could be used for supplies and paper. I don't know how many kids you had this year. 55 or 58. So there was a little money there that you could use that with. And I had another thought and it went.
What is current tuition for out of district students?
1,100.
Could it be bumped 100? Or
You
no?
set that in the
You
spring.
said that in the spring. Okay.
And are we at the state max right now? We're not at state max. The 1350 state max.
You-
1280, but
You could do, we historically have taken right around what the elementary number has been quoted from the state or set by the state. And we've never gone with that higher amount that we could go to for the 7th and 8th graders. But that is an option going into next year. So next spring, maybe the board wants to consider that. Would you charge the same for the K-6 and then the different higher tuition amount for the 7th and 8th? That is an option, but you can't go higher than what the state has set for out of district
But it's
tuition.
too late to do it this year.
You've already said it.
Already did that.
You already took board action. Yeah.
And I think the option that we could consider this year, which is, this is drastic, and I'm not saying that this is, something that wouldn't be taken with, or proposed with a lot of thought, is, if we have out of district kids that are, because you have max class sizes, if out of district kids are pushing us, basically in a scenario in one grade or another where we have to kind of have another teacher, and if we didn't have out of district kids, we could squeeze, those teachers into one spot, then, potentially, I guess since the contracts are out, it wouldn't make a difference on kind of our salaries and wages for this coming year. So, but maybe that's something to consider, moving forward, is just how we to just make sure that out of district kids don't make us, maybe a handful of out of district kids don't make us hire a full another teacher, because it's not necessarily, doesn't maybe pencil out for us.
And that's something the principals look at each year. I know that Tina and I have, in the past, we had some good conversations on that and what their capacity is and where the cutoff has to be for out of district students. Yep.
Are we taking?
And so, obviously that's a big thing to say. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, it's a big thing to say a current student, that's out of district, to say, hey, I know you've been here, K through 4th or whatever, but we don't have room for you anymore. Has that ever historically been done at our school?
I've had where I've not taken new at the middle school, Jeff, this is Tina, where we had to not take any more at the middle school level because it was too tight. And then, like you're saying, there are some years on the projected level that if we were looking at that in January, February, there are some students on that list that it's making a difference of having to hire another teacher. And it's just like it's like 4 kids over and we're having to hire another teacher. So it was something that would need to be looked at in late winter to know those projections and being able to let families know, hey, that class is looking too crowded for where they're going, and give those families a fair, give them a lead on that's what's happening. So.
We have had families that have wanted to come in as out of district and say they have 3 kids, and we've had to say, okay, we can take your kindergartner, but we can't take your 5th grader nor your 3rd grader. And so we have done that.
Are we even open to be taking students right now? Because I know it was shut down for a year or 2 anyway. Are we taking new?
So, the superintendent had put it into policy, not policy, but more as a procedural thing that, if the classrooms are, nearing max, then no, we would let them fill out an application, put it on like a wait list type. Teachers were allowed to bring their students from out of district. But like, let's say a parent comes to work here, starts the year out and they leave in November, well, then their students' tuition would end, or their enrollment would end at the end of that trimester. So they would have to be gainfully employed here in order to continue that. Otherwise, if somebody walks in and says, I want my 3rd grader to start here, we would take an application. And if there was room, it'd have to be board approved. But otherwise they would go on a wait list.
Yeah,
So
never
that's
really
more
closed
that.
completely. It was more of just like being more strict with.
Somebody said there was a law that said we couldn't be closed completely.
Well,
That was the reason, because
there's discrimination laws in
Yeah.
effect that you cannot
Right.
decline one person versus another based on random reasons. And
That's
so
right.
it has to be very, very clear. And yeah,
Stay pretty strict to just
so it's easier just
impingement
to
on
not have
class
rules.
size. Staffing.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it just depends on that individual class based on what grade level they would be at. That's what's looked at.
And if you charge.
Well,
for
they're not
one,
all
you
bad.
charge-
They're not all bad from a budgetary perspective. I get the public's concern, that we kind of fielded when we proposed the bond for the new school, where, it's like, hey, our out of district students requiring us to build a new school, which is one point that I can see the concern with. But otherwise, I mean, they can potentially kind of push you into a problem, or they can fill out your kind of in district enrollment and provide more revenues. So there's kind of from just a strict budget standpoint, I think there's they can be helpful, or they can, be challenging, but they're not just a negative from a budgetary perspective.
They're paying to come here, the 1,100 out of district, but the district is also earning money on those kids through the A and B. And
Exactly.
granted, we don't see it till the next year, but it still helps with the revenue for the district.
Okay.
I think our biggest issue is our A and B is right at that level of we're keeping our class sizes small enough, but our A and B is right at that level, like we almost can't afford to keep doing it, but we also don't want to go to class sizes of 27 and 28, right? Like it'd be different if we had the volume of kids that you could support the teachers that we have, but we're kind of right on that bubble of being, we're in the wrong spot at the moment. It doesn't mean that it won't change down the road, but.
Yeah. Yeah, if you only had a crystal ball, and that's something that we've said many times out here.
I mean,
So-
add 60 kids across all of the grades, and you're only adding a few kids per class, which is doable, and there's still small class sizes, and we're sitting really nice A and B wise. But right now, we're just right where we're at.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Whenever kids leave, like just that drop in the middle school, I mean, do we get like any kind of questionnaire, anything to know like what's causing them to leave?
We haven't. Usually we know if it's moving out of district
Tell us.
or if they're going to the middle school in town,
And this was a big drop. The number is that we have only 60 something in the 8th grade this year. And next year, you know, they've got 80 and the year behind that 90. And before that, we had 90 something. It's an anomaly in a year that's coming through. And there's one down in the lower grade level too that's a little bit smaller. And so whether we bounce back up or not, it just depends on the kindergarten incoming. But as far as exit interviews, we haven't done that. They usually tell us where they're going or why they're going. And it's mostly just been moves, really out of state moves, other town moves.
How many have we had like move, you know, in the last year? I mean, transfer, I guess, districts, because yeah, I guess some of it could just be the smaller class sizes, not necessarily leaving.
Well, 60 something left at the school.
Yeah.
That not just the middle school, the large bulk of them left from the elementary from October until now. So across all the grade levels, we lost over this school year. So people have sold their homes and moved out of the area, and people moving in don't necessarily have maybe a lot of kids. And the other thing is it goes with the economy. The better the economy is, the more people homeschool or send their kids to private school. When the economy gets bad, then we see a flood of kids coming back in, and the kids come to public school when both parents go to work. So part of that is you know, some of it, you know.
And the fluctuation
do we-
in the class sizes is just the norm. I mean, it just happens.
Do we have any like preliminary feel for what enrollment for next year will be compared to the current year? Is there any
Yes.
kind of soft projection on that? Are we kind of trending flat, up, or down?
Tina's looking that up.
Okay. Obviously, I know as I recall, kindergarten is a wild guess.
We have 38 registered already, which is a high number that we usually don't have that many registered at this point, but it's a crapshoot every year.
So do you know how much we're getting per kid from the state each year? Because OPI says that the board can not exceed 20% of the maximum per A and B rate set for the year for the attendance.
Say that again.
The OPI for the tuition rates that you guys can charge. It says the Montana law gives the local board of trustees the authority to set the tuition rate. The maximum rate charged for regular tuition may not exceed 20% of the maximum per A and B rate set for the year of attendance.
Do you know what the state's charging for the 23-24 school
No,
year?
that's what I asked.
Okay.
Because then that.
What did you present to the board when they set the tuition rates?
Probably something like this.
Because what we're understanding is you can charge 20% what the state gives you per kid per year in order for a child to come here for tuition.
24,
right?
So we get that money plus A and B.
So that's how high you could raise your out of district
Okay.
tuition.
So
this is for 24.
this is for your FY24 year, full-time kindergartners and students through 1 through 8, you can charge $1,275.08. For a 7th and 8th grader, because we run an accredited 7 and 8 program, it's $1,618.48. And so the board's gone with 1,100, and I want to
that way
say
for a
we've
while.
been at 1,100 since I was here.
I feel like when was the last time we raised it was my next
So-
question.
Yeah. It's
So
been a
yeah.
while.
So it's been a while.
for the following year. I mean,
So
No, I'd have to look back, but I think at least, I don't know, I was gonna say like 2017, 18 maybe.
yeah,
Have to look
it's
back.
been in place for a few years. So
Ignorance again, but when did we set that? So is that set for next year already, or can we change it now?
Well, I was trying to think, when would we have done that? Because I was thinking the last time we did it was when Cal was here though.
every year you need to do it.
Right.
And
When
so
should that be done?
you oftentimes would be looking in April to see if the state would have put that out by then, and you could have done it at your May board meeting. So if you haven't done it yet, then you'll want to put it on your June agenda.
So I'm pretty sure it was when Cal was here.
I don't think that we've done it this spring.
I don't think so either.
Okay, then you want to get that on your agenda. Yeah, it has to be, you need to be looking at that one every year.
So then we could increase it for the next year, you're saying?
They could,
Yeah.
depending upon the board in June.
1,600 for middle school and
Yeah.
almost 13 for
But-
elementary.
And you know, I'm, with that being realistic, then you have to look at these families and what, you know,
What they can pay.
they may not. And you've got a new game in town with what the legislature put in place where these kids can move from district to district. And so that's going to begin here in another year. And that's going to be very interesting as to how OPI is going to follow that and how that money's going to move. It's
Gonna get dirty.
yeah, it's crazy. And in the end, I think it's going to be one of those things that's just going to fall on the back of the taxpayer. And it's a shame. It's really a shame because we already had the ability for kids to move and go out of district to other schools. And so it's really a shame. But in reality, that's what we have to work with now. So
I don't know,
this year or
teachers
next
can
year?
afford a rate hike in tuition, because teachers will have to pay that for their kids, and that's.
Oh,
What was this part of it?
I don't think we
Teachers-
teachers don't pay.
yes, they
Oh,
do.
they
They
do.
do try, you have
Always have.
state law
They have
and
to.
you charge for one, you charge for
Once
all.
again, you can't charge something different for somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
What was the spring count?
What was it like?
I'll have to pull it up here.
So Laurel, they do a count in October and a count in February to see where your numbers are. And then they do an average on that for moving forward.
Okay, got it.
The other thing with budget amendments, and we used to look at it, if we had an increase of 6% in enrollment, then we, at the October count, then I would contact OPI and say, okay, would we be in line for a budget amendment? And in those cases, there could be a little more state funding that could come down. And so then we would put a budget amendment before the board, even if it was just $3,200 more that we could get from the state, we would maybe use a little, say we're going to use some of our reserves to get that 3,200. And then you don't have to touch your reserves, but you want to get any additional state money that you can get because you've had a significant enrollment increase.
Can you do that by the school? So did they project the middle school classes moving up that are larger, or did they just base it on what was?
Yeah.
Can you do it by school?
No,
You have to do it by the district.
because we're a K-8 district.
Okay, so it's a district thing.
Yeah. Because we had instances where we might run a $35,000 budget amendment, but that meant that maybe we're going to get 5,000 in state funding. And then, you know, we'd have that 30 of our own money sitting there, but then we would not use that so that we could put that back into the reserves going into that next year.
Would it not be on here though? Because it's on 22.
Yeah, it should show your February count is going to be on there for February 23. Look here, the report should be on there. Where did you submit it?
On Mayfair's.
Then go to Mayfair's.
So in terms of operating supplies, how vastly different is this budget from last year's budget?
That I don't know
Okay.
because I wasn't working with that. if I understand correctly, there weren't supply monies budgeted. Is that correct, Cecilia?
There was very minimal, like each teacher had a $200 class fund. That they had, otherwise there really wasn't a lot of, supplies.
And was the budget, like, did you go over budget or
So we
significantly?
did the draw of 250,000 from our reserves
But not for supplies?
for salaries.
For salaries.
Okay,
They started the year, and I remember getting a phone call that they were over budget by 250,000. And that salary, they were looking at salaries and benefits at 98% of budget. And so that's why they had to go to a reserve. That's the only thing they could do to balance their budget.
right.
Does that include the 60,000 to the former superintendent?
Yes.
When does that stop? Is that 3 years?
No, that's done as of June 30.
Okay.
And we've never seen these things before. Like, this is the first year we've had this kind of.
We're taking you old school.
Mhm. It's good.
This is what I used to use, and this is what
It's super helpful.
Mhm.
we would present to the board at our June meeting as the preliminary budget. And so bottom line, the board doesn't approve line item by line item. You approve the total budget. But it's still something that you need to know as far as where we are working within that budget and what we're working with. The one thing, because Cecilia's new, and this is new to her. Negotiations this year were new to her. She hasn't done it before. And of course, when the world flipped with COVID and we weren't meeting in person, there's a lot of things that the board wasn't in on as far as face-to-face meetings, the staff, administrators, but your business official has to be able to go to those in-services and meet with people. And so that's something, and the board needs to do that too. MTSBA, I know, would have in-person meetings this week. I want to say they're meeting for
Yes.
new trustees. I encourage you to be at that. You gain valuable information, and when you hold a training or go to a training, and the MTSBA will do one in the spring for budgets, the business official should go along with you so that you are seated, and she will have the documents that they'll be referencing as they relate to West Valley School. Any of the HR meetings that they would have and the administrators would go to, I would go to as well. Your business officials, your HR person in the district. And so she would be at those. We would have board members at those. So I encourage you to take those in. But it's important that Cecilia goes to the MASBO meetings because they cover everything from budgets to elections and everything in between. So here in another week is the state conference, and I'm going to go down and volunteer actually. And so Cecilia and I are going to get some time together to kind of, go over some things and visit about what she's catching up at the trainings.
So is this training something that we have budgeted for this next year, or?
It's budgeted for her. We've got money, excuse me, budgeted in here for, under the board, for board, there's board election and board expenses, and that would include any kind of legal fees. There's your professional dues with MTSBA is also included in there. So that's invaluable, your membership with Montana School Boards Association. The other thing that could be done for boards, and we business officials for about 3 years running, I think, we set this up where we would get together as our K-8 districts and we would bring in a legal person from MTSBA, and we might meet over dinner down at the Hilton. And so all the schools would get together to pay whatever the fee was to bring in Deborah Silk, for instance. But then our trustees and the business officials would be there, and then we would have an agenda set up with MTSBA. And that worked out really well. I just recommended that to somebody else that's on a school board in Central Montana, that would be a good thing for them to do with their smaller neighboring districts.
That sort of, with COVID, that ceased because those meetings did not occur.
Yeah.
And they're just slowly starting to come out
Yeah.
and do what you're talking about, but there have not been any since COVID, so that's what, 3 years now. We haven't had any. The outreach we've had is on Zoom meetings, which they just finished a 9-hour new school board training.
Okay.
This is by Zoom though.
Yeah.
But they haven't had any of that in person because of COVID for the last 3 years.
Hopefully they'll bring that back.
Yes.
I think it's invaluable when you can sit down and it's not just you in front of a computer screen, but you're with your whole board, and you're also with boards and reps from other school districts. And so the information that is shared is so valuable beyond what your registration cost was. And I can speak for myself, riding with other business officials to meetings, coming back when you're just pounding through this stuff that you just heard and talking with other people, even in the car, was huge. And the value in that is,
I think they're back to in-person now. I mean,
yeah.
seems.
So hopefully you guys
Well,
will
there
be
will
able to go to
The one
those.
in Helena will start on Thursday afternoon. And then that's the general MTSBA meeting, which will go over what the new laws, and there are many, many, many of them, will mean to the school districts.
Mhm.
And then the following day is the training that starts at 9 o'clock. So I'll go to that. It doesn't cost the school district anything. You know, anybody from the school board can go. I went last year too, but I don't think I had the perspective that I do this year. I think I'm gonna get a bit differently, but it was good at that point. That was the first time they'd had it in person for a long time.
And they'll have those changes from the legislative session
They'll
at
be,
the MASBO conference here
Yes.
next week.
right,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Because there were, I don't know how many laws passed that affect education.
Get them?
We'll find out.
Took me 6 hours. Okay, so spring count, Tina, district-wide was 749. 605 in K through 6, and then 7-8 was 144.
So right now we have about 710 in my counts for the next year, around 710, and that's just partway through the kindergarten signing in. So, and often they double from this point. They were at 36 last time I looked. I don't know what they're at now, but they usually double about between here and August, that kinder count.
So that's down
Well,
710.
And middle school was 7-8 was at
Usually triple.
140,
144.
and they're scheduled to be up at 170. So
What's the average kindergarten size?
80.
Okay.
it just kind of depends.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you never,
Yeah,
ever.
right,
know.
like some, they held them after COVID and then sent them all in, caused a bubble, things like that.
And birth rates.
Mhm.
And so
I mean,
we're gonna
that's
have
how we could find it out. It's just look up birth rates, Flathead.
there's gonna be a decline in about 4 years. So after COVID, we're gonna have a little, 3 years, we're gonna have a little decline for a bit. People stalled on families. We don't wanna be alone birthing in a hospital. So
So any other questions for me?
No, just thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there any major nuggets that you want us to walk away with that we didn't touch on at all? Like anything that's kind of,
Well, we pretty much hit on it all, so. Yeah, I had written down any high points that I wanted to cover, and either through your questions or what I shared, that we covered them, so.
and we have professional development as necessary budgeted in this budget, or I guess what are some of the big things that might be an issue that got cut here?
There's no money for outside professional development. One thing that's in this budget that we get Indian Ed money from the state. And so you'll see in here that 101,365, 1,000, that's the Indian Ed portion of the budget. And we're getting just shy of 19,000 in funding of Indian Ed, but that's all part of that $5 million number. But we have to line item it out. And so 10% of that, part of that pays 10% of one of the teacher's salary. Then we've got, of course, workers' comp, health insurance. We've got a smidgen of out-of-district travel, supplies, and minor equipment in there. So, and those are just plunked right there. But what we would do in the past is we would be able to get some supplies as they would relate to Indian Ed instruction, be it in the library or games in PE or things in the classroom. And so there's a nugget right there. There could be some professional development there for the staff. And whether they would choose to use their curriculum director to do that or bring somebody else in, there's a little money there, but it has to tie back to the Indian Ed funding.
Yeah, I feel like this year with the squeeze supplies and stuff, hopefully parents in classrooms, we can do Amazon wish lists, PTO maybe can help out.
Yeah, and so I guess that's my other question is, as I'm foreseeing need, like $200 doesn't get you very far in a classroom, like at all. And so what, do we have like policies and procedures in place that teachers are all very aware of for how to go about fundraising, or how do we make sure that that's a smooth process moving forward so that we're all on the same page?
Do you want to speak to that, given the couple instances you had this year?
Well, yeah, so I know Tina helped me address, the recent one. So if a teacher is going to do any fundraising, it needs to be done through the school. We've had a couple of teachers try to do GoFundMe or Venmo or Square or whatever, and go into their personal account. And as soon as we found that out, it was shut down immediately. So once somebody donates to the school, those become school funds and it cannot go into a personal account. So let's say teacher A wants to raise $500, they can ask for it, but it needs to come in to the school, to the office, and say, parent can write a check for $50, say, I want this to go to this classroom, and it gets deposited that way. But it has to be done. Yeah, there's policies surrounding this as far as fundraising.
Okay.
PTO could take over and do that for the teacher. If they say, hey, I want to raise $500, it could go through the PTO. It just has to be done either through PTO or through the school.
Up and running, there's ways to do that, to be able to have a fund to put it in and then donate it to the school.
And the Amazon wish lists and all that stuff, that's hunky dory.
It's like, if a parent wants to buy, crayons and markers and donate it to the class, then
Paper for the printer.
yes, then absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can go through, teachers can select like Amazon wish list, parents can buy that.
Yes,
And
and
there's
then
no
it
issues
either
with that.
come, straight to the school or to the parent, and then hand delivered to that teacher,
And those items are supposed to, if the teacher moves out, those items are supposed to stay.
with
If there's something remaining in the school, they stay in the
Yes.
school.
I have a question, if that's okay.
if the Title I, if that 400,000, if we get that, how much does that help us?
We don't get 400,000 in
Whatever
Title I. We
the-
might get 77,000 in Title I right now with what we have for grant. But we don't know yet where we're at with school-wide, so we have not budgeted any of that.
Okay.
So,
We wouldn't even have an idea of the amount. right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
That
so,
grant that Cindy was working on that you were finishing, wasn't that, I've heard a bigger amount, like in the hundreds of thousands.
And then with the changes, we weren't able to keep going with that, so we weren't able to keep that piece
So that
going
didn't
to
go
finish that, right? Yeah,
Okay,
there, with everything else without having the superintendent in the building,
so we lost all that
our
money.
jobs were,
All that money's gone.
which
Well,
we
that
don't know
was a-
that we would.
That was a
get that
long
money,
shot
but-
anyway, that wasn't.
But that is still something like in the future to look at. It's not a.
Right.
I don't consider it totally dead in the water, but as far as getting it in by the June date.
Okay. When you said Title I, that's what I thought you were referring to, was that
Oh,
grant that
yeah.
was
That
getting
makes
worked on that didn't get finished, so,
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay, so I thought that would help us
Do you want to speak to
significantly.
that piece a little bit, Cindy? On getting extra on the Title I?
getting extra on the Title I if
Yeah.
it moved forward with the school-wide.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you're gonna be looking at, if there's some teacher, it's gonna be something that's all within your grant and how it's written. And so maybe some of that money, a percentage of it, would go towards salaries. You'd have to do a percentage towards supplies and equipment, but it's all in how it's written and for that program. And it's been several years since I've worked with a school-wide Title I, and this one in the targeted assistance is the norm in a smaller school. But also, we're looking at where we're at with our free and reduced numbers. And so, I think for years, our numbers wouldn't qualify for school-wide. And so I don't know where you're at right now for free and reduced. I'm qualifying for that.
The free and reduced wouldn't, but they're looking at if you can show over time that the need with the scores
Mhm.
and the need for intervention that to prove title in that way versus funding versus the economics of the
Okay.
households. You can do it based on the needs of the students. And, but we have a lot of those pieces in place. Now, whether we can maintain those pieces to show that we're doing that is gonna be a challenge going forward. So. But we weren't able to get it in by the June date. Yeah.
If classes set fees, who sets the fees for a class? Say that we decide that in a science class or a robotics class, that there would be a fee for that class. Can we do that?
It's a board decision if we're charging fees.
But it's
like,
legal.
pardon?
It's legal to do that.
It is legal, yeah. And we, like when we instituted uniforms in PE and we said we're gonna charge, then, yeah, we set that amount through the board on what would be charged.
Like we set the athletic fees. We could set fees for, I kind of makes me ill to think of setting fees for science. But that is a possibility. We can do it.
You've had some through the years where the teacher might tell the kids that, depending upon what the project is, that there could be a certain amount that they'd have to pay for or something for that project in regards to, what would be a decent example? I don't know if it,
Trying to think if they even have collected at times for the pellets, like owl pellets or the frogs, or
We did
Yeah.
for pellets when I taught fifth grade.
you might
Yeah.
be doing a project and you might be collecting $2 a child. Or,
Yeah.
Sometimes in a middle school, they'll have a use fee for supplies that just aren't going to be, they're expended, they're gone. And so it's common for middle schools to have a general electives fee of like $15 or $20 that pays for those things for STEM and science and
they may have to pay for their choir shirts or something like that.
It was
to,
being talked
you know.
about when we had the 3D printer stuff all started and up and running. don't know if it was all just like absorbed into that.
Right, because it's a
That's how I
popular
go.
class and that class, it
Yeah.
costs, you know, money. The child leaves with their item, you know. And the fees there's rules on it in policy about the fees that you can't, you know, we were just talking about that with the computers. It can't be unreasonable if you have to provide a basic education, but it is also okay to have some fee-based items, you know.
And then kids who cannot pay fee, then I understand there's the fee,
Yeah.
Brooke has a little account or whatever. that-
Scholarships.
Pick it up with scholarships or the general fund picks it up or, you know, but.
But there's still that little kitty there, because that always worries me, the kid that can't do it, or parents don't do it. There is that, okay.
Yeah,
How
kids
is
have
that?
pay their cleaning fee for their band instruments, pay a deposit on that, and that pays to refurbish them every summer and.
Sure.
No. We've had a donation fund through, that people would donate to, and that's where some of the scholarship things would come. If a kid couldn't afford to pay for something, then the teacher would come to the business office and let us know, and then we can make that work.
Do we know how that fund is looking at the moment?
I think there's sufficient funds in there. So I know it helps out, you know, some athletics has pitched in. We've had kids need coats and coats and mittens but yeah, there's sufficient funds in there for that.
Thank you. They have a lot here to digest. Thank you very much, Cindy, for your time and expertise. And to Cecilia for the extra time and for all the work that's been going on here. We've spent a lot of extra hours. Thank you to Stephanie and Jeff for time to involve with the teachers with the budget. Okay, are we ready to go on to the next item, which is the hiring of Landon Henderson Middle School Social Studies teacher. This is an action item. So would you entertain a motion for that?
Do we want to intro it all, or we just want a motion? Because I'd be happy to give a motion, but
Let's,
does anybody want to say anything first?
Are you taking statements first or after the motion?
that's what I didn't, we can do either or both. Do you want to go and give a little explanation first? And
Well,
then we'll ask for comments before we vote.
I'll make a motion to
Okay,
accept the hiring of.
then we can get it on the floor. Then we can, okay. So the motion's been made.
I'll second.
Justin made motion, Laura seconded. Okay, now discussion.
So I just wanted to, first of all, speak to some of the positions in general of the middle school and teachers coming and going and what's happening with those positions. We had basically we're having changes in 4 spaces. So my thought at this time is to, for the math position, Mrs. Tegler is leaving to go on to other work, is to not fill that position at this time from outside, but to cover with the other teachers and then also have Terry Derenfield pick up part of those courses and use that. She would leave part of her instructional coaching, her MTSS coordinator to help fill that in. So we would not be filling that one. That would be a -1 in the middle school. Another one is the 7th grade ELA position with Mrs. Alvarez, and she is leaving to pursue other things right now. And without her, we would fill in from 5th grade and take a 5th grade teacher to that position. And then the 5th grade would reduce from 4 classes to 3. It's a different number size coming through. So that reduces 1 more from middle school. So that's a second one just reduced from middle school. Third one would be the 6th grade science position with Mrs. Dover. It's being filled by Mrs. Harmon from 6th grade math. She would be going from 6th grade math to science. Ken Besaw would be going from 5th grade teacher to 6th grade math. And that leaves an open 5th grade spot. And then Katie Hawes would move up from elementary, and that reduces the elementary by 1. So by reduction of numbers in elementary. So that is a -2 FTE in the middle school and -1 FTE in the elementary with those in-house changes. That's that right there. And a reduction of 0.3 off the MTSS middle school coordinator. So in regards to this position, I am speaking in support of hiring Landon Henderson for the middle school social studies position. And I wrote this down, so I don't ramble for you guys. But in regards to the need for the position, the vacancy was created by Laura Browning, transferring to a math position from 8th grade social studies. The students in the 6th through 8th grade have social studies as a year-long course. And the ability to staff both core and required courses for the, or required elective courses for the middle school program is dependent on having enough teachers to do so. So the teachers of the core subjects also share in teaching the elective course load. So every time you reduce a core teacher, you're reducing the ability to do the electives. Okay. So I'm mindful of budgeting concerns, and I'm asking for balance as you weigh school finance, which I know is very serious. But as you weigh school finance and providing adequate educational programming in the middle school, I'm just asking that you find that balance in making this higher. I understand the reductions overall, and I understand over time, but losing that many as it is out of the middle school, this is tricky and going to take rescheduling. And I think that it is already a great reduction off certified staff. And I think we might need to look at the whole school program at some point. But this represents a great reduction to certified staff. And this is a way I can see being able to go forward. If we hired the social studies position, I feel like the students would be able to have their core program and their required elective programs in this next year. It's a little bit of a pinch all the way around, but I think it's a move in the direction of reducing or getting closer to that line on the budget. And I feel like that's about what we have done, is about all middle school can take and still run the program at this time.
And all those changes are reflected in the budget that she just discussed.
Including the -1 elementary.
All of that's reflected. in there.
All of it is, okay.
So they have, with their number changes, and the bubble is moving upward towards middle school. So there's a bubble coming, and it, at that 5th, 4th, 3rd, this bubble. So, yeah, I'm just asking out of need, not want on this one. So anyways, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
If I may, so for those of you I've not met, I'm Landon Henderson. I'm the current 7th grade math teacher, the proposed 8th grade history teacher. Thank you, Tina. She talked about the necessity of the position. I'd like to talk and advocate for myself personally as an educator. As you know, I came into this year in a weird situation where I came over halfway. And what you may not know is there's been a lot of things that have happened this year where I had to miss time for a torn Achilles and surgery and an eye surgery. And I'm not asking for pity for those things, but I think what they do show is my commitment to West Valley, commitment to education. I don't have a math degree, I have a history degree, and I think the benefits, not just with staffing, but the benefits of having a secondary ed major who has spent 70% of his coursework in college studying how to teach or how about history is invaluable, especially because history is a subject that tends to get looked over by students and they don't always have the best experience with. And I come from a family of educators. My dad taught my personal American history course when I was in high school. And so I think I bring a passion for history and for educating that is not always there, especially in history classrooms. And I don't think it's possible to have if that position has to get filled in-house where you have teachers splitting the load for Montana history course instead of teaching electives, because that's an extremely high amount of work for those teachers to teach 2 different core subjects that are not even really all that similar. With math, you can overlap and stuff, but with history, there's no overlap. So that's all I have to say. I just thank you guys for your consideration.
Any further discussion? All right, call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Jeff needs to
Jeff
vote.
needs to vote.
Jeff?
Jeff, are you still there?
Aye. Yeah, I'm in favor.
He did. Okay, so it's unanimous. Landon Henderson will be our new middle school social studies teacher. Thank you. All right. Okay,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
One second.
okay, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Now we just have to work on that.
Right.
Not a chance.
Dang it, I saw it through and I just knew.
You should see the grist side in the classroom.
Go,
That's where
Greg.